All right. Hello, everybody. I'm going to invite everyone in the room to please find a seat or sort of quell your conversation. I know we had a poster session going on in here previously. So if you could kind of wrap up and start giving your attention to the front of the room and towards an amazing group of people that we're going to have presenting here over the next 2 hours, actually. So obviously feel free to get refreshments, go in and out, use the restroom, whatever you got to do during this time. My name's Alli Vitello, and I'm an ecologist and GIS analyst here in Colorado. And my colleague, Ashley Hom, who I will let speak for herself, we're going to be running this session. And what Adam really wanted to do in this session today was give the floor to people who have been at BeaverCon before or have updates from their states to give pretty much like a rapid fire update of what's been going on in their area, with their project, in their location, so that we as a community can try to keep tabs on what's happening. So that's going to be the first half of this presentation. And the second half is going to be us opening the floor up to you all and allowing this community to interact and speak with each other in a more open forum kind of manner. So for the first half, we're going to be listening. And for the second half, we're going to be chatting. And Ashley, would you like to just...
Yes, thank you so much. Ashley Hom with the U.S. Forest Service. I work for our National Partnership Office. I work with partnerships across the country, specifically with tribes and partnerships with tribes and tribal youth, and trying to encourage tribal youth and to learn from them and to work together on doing more beaver-based restoration with tribal youth. And Alli and I worked on beaver-based restoration here in Colorado, but we're excited to hear what other states are doing and just to hear from all of you. So we're really looking forward to the session. And that is all I have. All right, should we move on? All right, without further ado, we will start with Rachel Siegel, president of Illinois Beaver Alliance. And each speaker will have about 10 minutes, and then we can save questions for the end. So thank you, Rachel.
I guess I'll try to pull up my PowerPoint. And thank you. Should be able to... That work? Okay. Great. Okay, so my name is Rachel Siegel. I'm here to talk to you about the Midwest Beaver Summit. And my goal here is to inspire you to put on a virtual Beaver Summit in your region. Okay, so why would you want to put on a virtual Beaver Summit? Basically, this is such a great opportunity for you to, leverage your relationships with other nonprofits in your region to have an outsized impact. And you will be able to reach a lot of stakeholders and also lots of different types of stakeholders, just with one effort. And you'll also be able to reach the public. And this summit is very replicable. I've just passed out a flyer called Summit Planning for Dummies. There's a QR code on the back of it. And I'll talk about it at the end, but it really talks you through how to put on a summit. This presentation is more about why you should put on a summit. Okay, so our first summit was in 2023, and the Illinois Beaver Alliance worked on it with the Superior BioConservancy. Bob Boucher, Hannah Maliki, and I really planned the 2023 summit. And that year, we held it on 2 back-to-back Wednesdays. We had a shorter 2.5-hour session. We ended up with just over 800 people registering for it. And the first day, 323 people tuned in. The second day, 290 people tuned in. And of course, it's also on YouTube. So some of the sessions have had a couple, of course, Emily Fairfax's presentation has had a couple of hundred views. In 2024, we changed the format somewhat. We decided to just do one longer day. We had 1,200 people register, 567 people tuned in, which, that's a lot of stakeholders to reach. Stakeholders and, what was the word that Michael used, Bob? Rights holders tuned into. Just to give you an idea of what our digital assets look like. We had some really cute ones in 2023. And then in 2024, we also had a couple of different main themes and sub-themes. So it's not enough to just hold the summit, right? You have to figure out what your deliverables were, who you reached. So we organized everyone who registered into different stakeholder categories. So environmental nonprofits, federal natural resource management agencies, also state, local, tribal, watershed alliances, agriculture, agroforestry, land trusts, and there were a few other categories that we divided people into. Anyone who didn't share enough information about themselves, we just put into a public category, and then we did sort them by state, tribal, and federal. So, a stakeholder in my mind is someone who really cares about the health of our watersheds. So this was the breakdown by state in 2023. I won't read it out loud. Obviously, we had the most people sign up in Wisconsin and Illinois, which are the states that Bob and I are from, or Superior BioConservancy and Illinois Beaver Alliance are from. And we actually had a pretty good number of people who register, who works for the federal EPA, the Federal Department of Agriculture, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. So that was pretty cool. Now in 2024, we really, really drilled down and got into the market. So in Illinois alone, you can see we had 174 stakeholders. And I actually think that local natural resource management agency category is the most important, because these are people who are managing forest preserves, conservation districts, park districts, stormwater management commissions, people who probably experience and have to resolve beaver conflicts on a regular basis. We also had a pretty good turnout of people who are affiliated with environmental nonprofits within the state, land trusts, the Prairie State Conservation Coalition, which is the group of land trusts, was actually a co-host of the event. And then we didn't make great inroads into agriculture. That's clearly still an area that needs some improvement. 8 with the State Natural Resource Management Agency and 76 with the public. Wisconsin, very similar, 104 stakeholders, and you can kind of see who fell into which categories. Michigan, which was kind of, coming up in third place, 85 stakeholders. We had a number of co-hosts from Michigan, and that really helped us get into that market. Okay, then this is the other Midwest states for 2024. I mean, you can see a large number of people were reached. Oklahoma showed up with 22 stakeholders. I guess, there are states that aren't quite Midwest, but are interested and share enough similarities. And then we had stakeholders from all of these other states as well. So yes, this year we spent some time reaching out to co-hosts and sponsors at the beginning, and you can see we really had just an incredible number of co-hosts from each of the Midwest states that helped us by sharing on their social media and sharing with their email, distribution lists. And our 2024 presentations are on YouTube. Last I looked, I made this PowerPoint on October 2nd, so you can see that many of these had 100 or close to 100 views already. So just to briefly touch upon the how, I've put together this document, Summit Planning for Dummies. Bob doesn't like the word dummies. He thinks I should have done 101, but I think it's funny, as long as I'm amused. So in this flyer, you will find technology suggestions for how to manage a summit, sample, and then on my website, I actually saved as PDFs examples of all of these things, sample outreach and confirmation letters to presenters and sponsors and co-hosts, and then how to manage those people, emails asking for bios and headshots and tech checks and logos and all that stuff. And also how we marketed the event, how we built our invitation lists, what our social media schedule looked like, the digital assets we used, the press release we wrote, Then the post-event attendee survey, the slideshows we used at the beginning and end of the summit, the schedule we put together for our tech person to click in and out of different slideshows and videos, the final report we put together, and the follow-up email to registrants with the links to the YouTube videos. So all of those are available on my website, and there's actually a QR code on the back of the flyer that will take you to Summit Planning for Dummies. So if you decide to put on a virtual regional Beaver Summit, it's all ready for you. You just have to adapt it to your region. And I just want to mention that the 2025 Midwest Beaver Summit is going to be a hybrid event. We got a grant so that we can do some of it in person and the rest of it virtual and still make it like a really positive experience for both types of attendees. So that's it.
Rachel kicks ass. She really gets stuff done.
Bottom, pull up your thing. And then I got this to work.
Yeah, okay. Good morning. Thanks for coming. I'm going to rocket through a number of different things here. Superior BioConservancy. This is about the landscape planning of what our mission is. All right. Sorry. Can everyone hear me okay? All right, now we're in. So this is our title. Our mission really is to be a healthcare plan for the bioregion of what's called the Laurentian Forest Province. This is the north woods of Minnesota, Michigan, and Wisconsin, primarily because it hasn't really has agriculture. It is still one big continuous forest. So this is the bioregion. I want you to go with me and just think we're living on an organism. Everybody in here is an organism, and we're here to be an advocate for our water organism, the beaver. So the flat area here is the region of that forest, and the yellow area is the drainage of Lake Superior, which is the most important freshwater body in this hemisphere and one of the most in the planet. So we have a cabin up on it. I can walk out in front of my cabin. I can put this cup of water and drink it, and it's perfectly fine. So it's also important for the continental United States and Canada because it's the headwaters of America. So we have Mississippi River. So this is a headwater. This is like wellhead protection for the water resources of the planet. And so it's really an important area for canoeing and water sports. So this is all some of the recreational area that's throughout it. And it's 33,000 square miles of this. Out of about 100,000 square miles is your land. So this is public land. So we're connecting public land with corridors and looking at beavers as the resource for rebuilding the biodiversity and the stream health. We also have the most wolves. It's the biggest reincarnation of wolves in this continent. So we've had 4,400 wolves come back in since 1972. So it's also high carbon. From a carbon sequestration standpoint, this landscape is extremely important, and it's very regenerative. We have 35 inches of rain, so we grow things fast there. This wolf range is here, and so this is an important aspect for biodiversity because this keystone carnivore, one of its primary things is it likes to eat beavers. But there's the brother wolf. And the Anishinaabe people, the Ojibwe people, or also called Chippewa, have a relationship to it sort of as a kinship brother. So they feel that their fates are connected. And this is one of the key things. So this is the tribal rights here. These are called usufructuary rights. They have the rights to hunt and fish and gather across that ceded territory. So it's just a big area, and it's been upheld in the Supreme Court. But this is the waterways of this. This is all this hydrology. And this area here has the capacity to have one of the highest densities of beavers in the United States because it's fairly low gradient, it's woods, and we have a lot of water. So this is what some of the more mature systems, this dam system has been here since documented in 1868. And we know about these benefits, and this is from Voyageurs National Park. And we know that these things are speed bumps, and we know that they work as sort of this combination of sewage treatment plants as well as storm water detention ponds. And this hyporic zone, this underneath water, which was Ellen Wohl referred to as the kidneys of taking nitrates out. This is where the metabolism happens and how waters get cleaned by natural groundwater flow. And so the hydrology in stormwater is important, and also that this flood resistance is really important. And that's one of the sales points that you can do with beavers wherever you are in the United States. So I worked on a study with UWM and the Milwaukee Metropolitan Sewage District, and the bottom line is we placed 52 hypothetical dams in, and we lowered peak flood levels in downtown Milwaukee up to 37%, up to 40%, in one village 62%. But all these houses that are here in red would be taken out of the floodplain technically if we re-beavered our watershed, which is about 900 square miles. So this is a study that you could duplicate in any of your landscapes wherever you are. The Milwaukee Metropolitan Sewage valued this at about $3.3 billion in stormwater value, giving a metric of, and sometimes you just have to translate this into not the relationship, the dollar savings. So these are those natal benefits that beavers give us: climate, flood reduction, biodiversity, stable quality, and stream structure. So Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources is sort of in the dark ages on this, so they've been killing beavers because they feel that they damage trout habitat. And so this was bothering me immensely. So so I worked with some lawyers. We had 5 lawyers who worked for us pro bono, and we filed a lawsuit in June of 23 to stop the killing of beavers for trout, and being funded by the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources. So this forced the agency, USDA, APHIS, Wildlife Services, responded last August 17th, and they said they would have a new environmental assessment to reevaluate this. So they originally said they'd have it done in March, and then they said they'd have it in August. And so they're supposed to have it done next November, next month, this November. And so having this group weigh in on this environmental assessment, which is about 100 pages long, to contradict this fallacy of how they damage landscapes as to move forward to restoring landscapes. So biological integrity is a term that's in the Clean Water Act. And I encourage everyone here in your group, get a lawyer. The earth needs a lawyer. Having law, you have laws that can protect beavers. Get a lawyer, find the edge, find the net, and if you can't get attention from agencies, guys, get a lawyer to put the letter on their stationery. Now you have their attention. Don't be bashful about this, because we have a climate crisis. You have to treat it like one. So biological integrity is the purpose of the Clean Water Act. And basically what it says, an environment that supports an assemblage of organisms similar to that produced by long-term evolutionary processes has high biological integrity. That's what beavers do for us. They're our warrior for that. So with the climate, they talk about climate, but it's really a biodiversity crisis, because the climate is a product of biodiversity. We're a product of biodiversity. So this has been recognized throughout the earth. I think of beaver ponds as the fruit on the apple trees. And so having those, bringing that forth across the United States for biodiversity is really key. So again, these are those benefits that beavers give us. So what we did was we did a mapping thing where we connected the public lands, this 21 million acres, together using a system called Omniscape, which I'm going to shoot through quickly. But basically, we want to have connecting corridors between all this public land. So how does that work to get it to work together and find those corridors? So we hired Kurt Meinke, who's of Septima, and then we looked at this area, this 101,000 square miles. And the goals were to bring this together, to tie that together, stitch it together as whole. And so we did this model, which I'm going to jump for, but if any of you, get your cameras out. I want you to take a picture of something coming up, which is the YouTube of how to navigate this particular model. And so what it does, it looks at resistance between places and how do you get things to get through them. So what's the simplest way for a wolf, a turtle, to get across the road and move forward? And so this Omniscape was developed by the Nature Conservancy, and it's really built on electrical theory. And so I'm going to jump ahead, but to show you the results of this. So you look at the potential landscape for permeability. How does it absorb across each other? And what we ended up doing after running these things, this blue area, which we end up calling part of a core reserve, is where so it's almost like the mycelium in the land where wildlife can make their way across. And then we took this and we married it with the watersheds. And so we added these elements of features which you can get from USGS. And then we broke down the watersheds into 3,000 watersheds, subbasins, down to HEC 12. So this is HEC 10, and then we took it down further. So each one of these can be functionally, you can factor in what the potential beaver population is using the formula from peer-reviewed science. And so you can come up with what you should have there, potential carrying capacity. So that navigate this tool, which is on our website. So this is some of the linkage maps that we had. And so when you link the linkages with these watersheds, you get a really interesting pattern. So the eventual thing is we hope to have about 7 million acres that should be protected. We call it the connective tissue across this landscape. So this is if you look at this, take this photo if you're interested in how to do this. And on our website, it's also on their Superior BioConservancy. But it's an 11-minute video, and it shows you how to navigate this. And this can be done across the United States for planning, for beaver restoration in any state. And I think this would work really well for the folks in California, especially because they have a landscape, as well as in Colorado. Whoops. Whoop. So there's applications for this. For conservation policy and planning, educational awareness, and public engagement. You have a way to look at environmental impact statements and do them intelligent so you can be well represented if you have comments to give on a forest plan, for example. But for climate change adaptation, these resilience building that beavers can do for us in the rivers of the United States is critical. So these ecosystem services presented can have metrics, they can have dollar values, but it's really about the relationship we have with the earth in the end. So support conservation organizations, that's why we're doing this, for all the different players in the band. And promoting ecotourism, because obviously people want to see wildlife if they're going out on a hike. And the community and indigenous rights, to uphold those rights, those scape rights that he was talking about before. So in essence, one of the last things I'd like to do, so when USDA would be coming out with this report, potentially next month, I would like everyone in the room to potentially comment on this in a pro-beaver way, to have a change in policy. This is a federal agency describing a federal policy. So it has national significance with USDA Wildlife Services, which is in the business of managing a lot of wildlife but killing a lot of wildlife, beavers, coyotes, and other things. So for biodiversity, they're important. So thank you for the time, and
Thank you, Bob. I think we need to find Bob a longer session. You've got a lot there to absorb, so thank you. Next, we have Clayton Frazer with the principal ecologist with the native range ecological. Did I get that right? Ecological. Thank you.
All right. I'd like to move a little bit, so I'm going to jump outside the podium. I've got 5 minutes, so I'm going to make this really rapid fire. So my background is restoration ecology. I went to school for wildlife ecology. My business partner and I started this company just a couple of years ago. I've been doing this work in Wisconsin for about 25 years. And in 2022, Bob dragged me to BeaverCon in Baltimore, and the rest is history. A year later, we started our business, or a month later, rather, we started our business, and we folded non-lethal beaver management and beaver coexistence into our business model. I went through the Beaver Corps training program, and then we quickly realized the biggest loggerhead in our state to getting flow devices installed was the permitting function, right? So I spent a few years early in my career as a biologist with Wisconsin DNR, and I started to quickly leverage those early relationships with those people in wildlife and fisheries. And we kind of realized, there was a big disconnect about what flow devices were. There was misconceptions. There was some distrust from the fisheries folks. You've heard those central themes before, and they're certainly true in Wisconsin. But moreover than not, what we got when we got through some of those technical elements and helping people become more comfortable with them, we realized that now we're dealing with water management resources, which really in our state controls what goes on with navigable public water on private land, right? So, you know, the upshot of it is that we found a couple of clients, a couple of private landowners in the last 2 years that really had the desire to push this thing, get the permits. We knew it was going to be an uphill battle, and it was. It was not inexpensive for these clients, these landowners, to do this, but we facilitated this. We did a pond leveler. We installed that actually a year ago today, my business partner and I, and it was probably not the first pond leveler put in Wisconsin, but it was, to our knowledge, the first one permitted on private land with public water moving through it. So it was kind of a big deal. They're in the process of that permit phase. The DNR every month would call me or email me and say, "Are you sure you want to do this? Because we can stop this right now. We can drop it." I said, "Well, as long as my client is pushing us doing this, we're going to keep proceeding forward." So we did. We got that one in. And now we're working on a couple of BDA permits. We actually took one last year, the biggest success story we've had to date. It took us 18 months to get this permit. And I don't even want to tell you what it cost the landowner and just all the facilitation, the behind-the-scenes consulting work it took. It was exorbitant. And our goal now, ironically, that project is being installed today. My business partner is there. And so it's just serendipitous that I'm here at BeaverCon talking about this. And I'm looking at text messages of the photos of these BDAs going in. So it's pretty exciting. But the upshot here is that we wanted to get through a couple of projects. We want to be able to help define to the DNR what the problems are so that we can fix them, right? We want to be able to move forward with a permit framework that's more reasonable in a more timely manner, that's just more attainable to the average landowner in Wisconsin, right? So that's where we are. We're working on this structure of framework, but we wanted to get through it first to realize what the challenges were for it, right? So that's kind of where we are. We're really excited that BeaverCon is coming to Minneapolis. It's just 4 hours away from me to drive up there, and we need this collective support and community in the upper Midwest and the Great Lakes states. So hoping everybody can make it to Minneapolis in a couple of years. I know I'll be there. So I think that's about all I have. Do I have more time? Oh, wow, okay. So I'm ahead of myself. Well, so I can go back and talk a little bit about these projects. So again, what we went through to get BDAs permitted in Wisconsin, we're dealing with 4 divisions of DNR: wildlife, fish, water resources, and dam safety engineering. And the dam safety engineers are really the ones who took us to the woodshed on the permits, right? A lot of hydrologic modeling, structural load testing requirements on BDA posts, engineering plan set documents, elevational surveys, right? A lot of hydro modeling. And if anybody who's been around that type of work realizes it's expensive, it's time consuming, right? And in my world, we make our living on the billable hour. So these things add up. And the reality is that, you know, we identified early on this was going to be a complicated process, but we wanted to get through it, like I mentioned, to be able to say, this is not working and we need to fix this machine, right? So that's kind of where we're going with it right now. But it took a couple of these landowners to be the pioneers for this in our state, right? And now I've got colleagues in the private sector and agency biologists in both the federal and state sector in Wisconsin that are picking this up. And they're building BDAs and process-based restoration models into wetland mitigation bank plans and into restoration concepts that go in water. We work a lot in water. That's kind of our company's focus is biodiversity support, and we do a lot of stream restoration planning and monitoring. So that's that. That's kind of the goal, is right now just working through these projects, identifying the challenges that we have, which are many, and trying to work with the DNR. You know, Bob and others who have been advocates in our state have gotten us open doors and gotten us meetings with people that are going to matter in policy and statute changes. But that is what it's going to take, ultimately, because right now we don't have a box to check for these things. It's square peg, square hole. And we can't continue to work with the framework that we've got. It's just prohibitive, right? And so that's our goal, is to get in front of these agency folks, start these with one project at a time, I remember a couple of years ago, Scott McGill gave me some great advice that still sticks with me, which was that if you're going to move the needle, you don't do it by promulgating all the data and the science. It's about human connections, right? We have to get in front of these people, appeal to them, listen to what their concerns are, validate them, and move forward together, right? And help them one at a time, one agency staff person, one landowner at a time, advocate for them, become comfortable with them. As an agency guy or an ex-agency biologist, I can tell you what their concerns are, is stamping a permit application and having it not work. And they are on the hook for that, right? There's a lot of accountability, especially in water in our state. We have no shortage of water in the upper Midwest. It's about quality of that water, and that's really what we're trying to move for right now. So with that, I will give up my remaining moments for questions.
All right. Thank you so much, Rachel, Bob, and Clayton. I mean, just what's happening in the Midwest is fascinating. I think especially for many of us who are here in Colorado, you face a lot of really different challenges than what we face, but I hope all of us can take lessons learned in both directions. And with that, I'm really excited to welcome Shelby, Weigand, and will Elissa be coming to the stage as well? Okay, great. Well, both of these lovely ladies, Shelby Weigand is with the riparian. She's the riparian connectivity manager with the National Wildlife Federation, and Elissa Chott is the beaver conflict resolution specialist, also with the National Wildlife Federation. So give it up for these women of science here.
Okay, awesome. Thank you, everyone. I'm Shelby Weigand, as she said, with National Wildlife Federation, and Elissa will jump up here in a second. I'm the Riparian Connectivity Manager for the Western Water Program within National Wildlife Federation, and Elissa is our Beaver Conflict Resolution Team Lead on full-time with National Wildlife Federation. And we're going to talk a little bit today about the state of work in Montana. And obviously, this is not going to be everything that's happening. We only have 10 minutes each, as we just learned. So it's certainly not going to cover everything, and we're certainly not the end-all be-all of beaver work in Montana, nor are we the only people who have been doing beaver work. And I just want to recognize the First Nations who have been stewarding the relationships with beaver in Montana and the habitat that they provide long before we ever came along and caught on to this fun trend, but we're not the only ones here. So I will start off by this lovely image here of our riverscape of work in Montana. In Montana, much like in an astomosing riverscape, the state of beaver restoration has meandered and evolved over time. And this is not a linear timeline. As you can see, there are branches and meanders coming off of our riverscape, and that really signifies the evolution of the work in Montana. And how things evolve and change. And we don't have time to dive into everything, as I mentioned, but I hope Elissa and I can kind of provide a general landscape of work, and we'd be happy to have you come talk to us afterwards. And we also have little stickers to hand out, so a good incentive for you to come say hi. And I just really wanted to highlight the unique position that Montana is in and how we've managed beaver, and the unique partnerships and relationships that we've made along the way, which are fantastic. Montana is one big small town. I'm neighbors with our BLM hydrologist. We go on walks and we talk about beaver, but she's also in our beaver working group, and so things get done, and it's pretty neat how that can all work together. So I just said it's not a linear timeline, and I'm going to show you a linear timeline real quick. But this just demonstrates some of the history of the state of work, beaver work in Montana. So we'll start at the headwaters of our stream, which is the Beaver Working Group. It is what is tiered off of, or a lot of our work is tiered from, and I'll show you a little bit of our action plan where a lot of this work is kind of born from, but that didn't come later. So I want to start from kind of the beginning, but not really. So in 2014, the Montana Wetland Council hosted a meeting recognizing the benefits of beaver and the benefits that they have on our landscape. And that kind of sparked a larger conversation about folks really wanting to have beaver stay in place in Montana in some places where it's appropriate. And so in 2017, FWP brought together a workshop and a meeting for the entire state recognizing the benefits of beaver and the management in our state, and they hosted it within our state capital and then said, we want beaver, obviously, they have great benefits, but what are we going to do about the conflicts that arise when we have more beaver on the landscape? And that's what birthed our Montana Beaver Conflict Resolution Program, which Elissa will talk about here in a minute. I'm not going to dive into it, but it's a really cool program, a little teaser there. And then in 2019, NWF took on a leadership role and kind of more formalized this group. And then in 2022, we were able to create the first ever Montana Beaver Action Plan. And that action plan started at the beginning of the pandemic, and so not a whole lot got done. Everybody looked at it and looked at the state of beaver management in Montana and were like, this is what we want to see. And then the pandemic happened and not a whole lot got done from that, but we still had that base document. And so then in 2022, I came onto this role after my predecessor, Sarah Bates, who's retired now, left her position, and I started this conversation back up. And in December of 2022, we hosted a virtual meeting to kind of regroup and say, where are we at now? What has changed since we last met? And then we had a in-person meeting in 2023 and wrote the 2023 action plan that we're now working off of. And it's a 3-year action plan. And that has different goals and strategies that I'll get to in a second. But I first wanted to talk about where we have come in 2024, which is today. This past March, we hosted our annual meeting in Browning, Montana, in collaboration with the Blackfeet Nation. And the Montana Beaver Working Group, just to give you a little bit of background, is a voluntary coalition of agencies, nonprofits, trappers, state federal agencies and private citizens all interested in beaver management, restoration, and research in the state of Montana. And so all of these people are doing the work within the state action plan. And so some of the things that have happened this last year, tiering from our 2023 action plan, is that FWP published our first ever white paper. So up in that top corner, beavers and their role in riparian restoration in Montana. It's an excellent read. It's a very long document, so maybe a good plane ride read there, but it covers everything from beaver biology to restoration, all the way down to if we were to do relocation in Montana, what would a facility looks like, which we don't do relocation quite yet in Montana, but we're on our way, and that gives us a great guideline for that and goalpost. Our conflict mitigation program was able to expand this last year, so we cover almost the entire state of Montana, which is amazing. And we achieved some other monumental goals within that action plan, including the forest action planning. You might have seen on our table and in Elissa's presentation yesterday that we have a guide to incorporating beaver into forest action planning. And the Lolo National Forest, based off of comments both from that guide and from the Montana Beaver Working Group, incorporated our comments into their draft action plan. And I really recommend you looking at that document. It's also on our website. And it is an excellent resource for putting in public comments around beaver and has literature cited for that. And so our Lolo National Forest has been extremely engaged, which is awesome. And also we were able to kind of improve some of what is going on there. And then also Tori Ritter with our Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks State Wildlife Agency was able to complete a statewide beaver dam census as he presented on yesterday, which is a great step forward for our data collection arm of the Montana Beaver Working Group. So here are some of the pillars of our action plan. or goals, as you might call them. We have 4 of them. I'm not going to read through them. I made them big, so hopefully you can read them. And then tearing down from each of these goals, we have strategies and actions. And each of these logos and organizations, and this is certainly not everybody, but I tried to capture as many as I could, are the foundation of each of these goals. These are the folks that are actually implementing all of this work. And it's really cool that in Montana, we can identify an issue and then we can do something about it. We're uniquely positioned that we can do that, and the people who created these goals are the ones that are implementing the actions associated with them. So I find that really inspiring, and also just a cool way to do conservation, and that we get to move things and adapt as the landscape of work changes. We can evolve with policy changes, for example, and be resilient, just like our riverscape that I showed you. And with that, I think I will pass it over to Elissa to talk a little bit more. She's going to dive into goal 3 a little bit more on how we communicate this information across Montana.
Hello. Can you hear me? Okay. Yeah, so I am the co-chair with Rob Rich. He's an ecologist and naturalist out of the Swan Valley in Montana, and we work on that goal 3, providing coordinated education and outreach efforts together. We're the co-chairs of that. And so that really works on finding information, getting it together, and then finding ways to get that to the people who need to have it. And so we are still working on that and developing things like one-pagers if we need those, and just identifying also what are the frequently asked questions around beavers in Montana, and then how do we get that information out to the folks who need to know it and who want to know it. This way? Oh, there we go. I can hear myself now. Okay, so we also have a Beaver Working Group newsletter that goes out bi-monthly, and we have over 400 readers, which is really awesome. And we feature things like stories, what projects are going in the water, what work is getting done, inspiration, action, new resources available, whether that's new research papers being published, videos, etc., with things that maybe we can learn and implement in Montana. So we don't just keep it to Montana work for the resources, we kind of pull from everywhere. Events, any upcoming meetings, webinars, conferences like BeaverCon, and then opportunities like jobs and grants, so that those readers can connect and find those different opportunities, or if somebody's season is ending, they can go on to the next restoration job. We have 2 annual meetings, one in March that's in person, and we try to bounce around to get closer to our eastern partners. Montana's a big state, and just make sure it's an equal opportunity to have the meeting in different locations so that we can highlight these the different work going on in the field visits and workshops that we have for those meetings. Subcommittees meet twice a year, and then we have one virtual update meeting in December, and so that is a very quick overview of coming off a field season, what everybody got accomplished. And this is the program that I manage, and so it started as a pilot project in 2019, as probably a lot of you here in this room have either heard me talk or know of it. But we help landowners live with beavers. And so we cover the 3 main conflict calls that we get in: tree wrapping, culvert plugging, and then freestanding dam flooding. And so we address those for landowners. And this conflict program helps key into all that other work within those 4 goals of the Beaver Working Group, and helps this work get done. Because without conflicts, the traditional method of conflict resolution in Montana is lethal trapping. And so where can we keep beavers in place where they're appropriate and where landowners want them, where they can spread out and have their complexes in Montana? And so our program helps address those needs. And so this really has a broad implication of where beavers can expand and disperse into, so that we can have these great beaver complexes and beavers can do their beavery thing. A very important component of why this program is successful is the cost share aspect of it, our time and travel. We have 2 technicians besides myself doing the on-the-ground work. Our time and travel is all covered by the program. And so the cost share component, we are subsidizing these devices that are going in the water. and telling landowners, we believe in this enough to help you pay for it. So generally, we pay for half of the material costs, up to $500. Our cost share is administered by Defenders of Wildlife. And then we also work closely with Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks agencies, private landowners, and other NGOs. And that's for training opportunities, identifying where conflicts are, where it's these interest in having beaver complexes, and where we can get education and outreach, training opportunities, workshops, all of that comes together. And so I really wanted to highlight 3 different partnerships we have to expand upon the really great coordination and collaboration going on within Montana, because I think it's often overlooked. So number 1 is FWP Tori. There you are. He has just been instrumental in getting the advocacy and just the interest growing within FWP. And we've been working very closely together for 6 years now. FWP is actually buying materials and tools and giving it to our program so that we can go out and implement that. So I'll let that sink in. And then Lolo National Forest. Oh, and then within FWP, to back up just a minute, Tori and I, or Tori really, developed a few years ago kind of a funnel system within FWP where all of the conflict calls from biologists and the wardens coming in, that Tori would funnel them and then kind of screen them if they were a good candidate for a non-lethal option, and if the landowner was willing to work with our program, that then we would get funneled that conflict. And so now we have kind of advanced beyond that, where Tori has opened it up and said, okay, just contact this program directly, which is kind of unheard of for a state wildlife management agency to say, hey, contact this nonprofit, and they will come help you. And so since Tori and I have been paired together and working on conflicts for a few years as we expanded into other regions, that is how we have modeled that as well. So our other technicians are paired with the non-game biologist within their region. And so we're working with Claire Gower out of Region 3 and Brandy Scone out of Region 4 as well. And so that is how we get the majority of our conflicts, is directly from FWP. So moving on to Lolo National Forest, Forest Service, these 3 agencies are probably the biggest landowners, public landowners within Montana. And so Lolo National Forest has been really, really ahead of the game in terms of beaver coexistence and beaver advocacy, because their draft management plan has really strong language about having beavers in the headwaters and then allowing them to spread out in those valley bottoms where they can just have these massive complex valley bottom to valley bottom, and then have that dispersal. And so everything from that complex downstream is happier and healthier thanks to these beaver complexes. And so they're actually funding our program too. They have asked the conflict program to come in, assess situations, and are working with us to install devices. We did 11 installations so far this year in Region 2. 4 of those were on the Lolo National Forest. And so the funding that they've given us covers my time and travel, some monitoring, and then the time it takes to install these devices as well. And so that's spread out over several years, but that's just their commitment to having beavers on the landscape, able to spread out, and then address those conflicts as they pop up at culverts and road crossings. And there are BLM partnerships. I think I saw Alden in the back somewhere. There he is. But BLM has, at a state level, has a programmatic EA for low-tech work and restoration work in the state of Montana. And as part of that, are also funding beaver conflict work, because if you're having BDAs and areas where beavers can move into and start managing these restoration projects by themselves, you're likely going to have conflicts at some point. And so we just had, within the past 2 weeks, we had a virtual training and kind of education workshop within BLM for BLM practitioners and land managers in Montana. And then as a field component to that, a couple days later, we went out and installed an exclusion fence to be proactive. Shelby did a big restoration project in a valley bottom right outside of Missoula, and beavers are on the main stem of that creek. slowly moving up, working on the BDAs, and then across the road is a culvert, and so we put a culvert fence on there to get ahead of the beavers as they're moving up that drainage. So I think that's all I want to say on that. That's our contact information. If you're interested in joining the newsletter, you can email Shelby and they can put you on our email list then. Thank you.
Fantastic. Kind of a fun fact, I started my Forest Service career 15 years ago on the low, and there was I never heard the word beaver ever as a hydrologist there. So it's just so neat. 15 years later, the tide is really changing to see just our federal public lands being bolstered with beaver. So it's just really encouraging. I was also up the Swan Valley and worked up there, and we never talked about beavers. We were doing, all kinds of stream restoration and mine mitigation, all these different things. So it is so fantastic to see where we can go in such a short time. And now we have coalitions and mitigation and coexistence and beavers coming back. So really encouraging. Thank you for sharing. Next up, we have Jen Vanderhoof. Fantastic last name. Senior ecologist with the King County Department of Natural Resources and Parks, Science, and Technology Support Section. Thanks.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. Would you help with that? Although I don't know that I'm going to really use it that much. I might have misunderstood what I was asked to come here and talk about. So I might wing it. Yeah. Pick a topic. Oh, there's so many. So I thought I was being asked to come here and sort of represent Washington State and give an update of everything that was happening in the state related to beavers. Obviously, I couldn't have done that anyway, but that's where I started. And so what I think I might do now is give a couple of this. I think you were there. Yeah. Give a couple of statewide updates, and then maybe I'll just talk about what I'm doing at King County, since that's what it seems like folks are doing, talking about their own. Oh, no. There it is. It's there. It's there. Okay. All right. So first of all, I did think that I was going to be updating across the state, but I'm like, well, a map of the state, it's a rectangle. That's not that interesting. So maybe I can find a beaver in the shape of Washington State. And I couldn't. But they're cute, aren't they? So I might come back to this in a second just because it's a nice background. But there are a few things going on across the entire state that King County is involved with that are worth mentioning. We have a statewide beaver working group. We meet quarterly, and we've got a bunch of subcommittees as well. This statewide group is able to coordinate on topics related to relocation, coexistence, research, outreach, all the things, with one pretty significant exception, which is policy, because some people working for some agencies can't really work on policy. So we actually have a separate beaver policy working group. And that was only formed within the last year. And then in the last year, the main focus was a bill that we were trying to get passed that would have actually provided a pretty significant amount of funding for beaver-related work, mostly coexistence. It would have been great. We had a very short session this past year, didn't make it all the way through, it made part of the way through. And now the group is reconvening to talk about next steps. Do we want to change anything? What do we want to do next? So by this time next year, we'll know what happens. And then if you stop by, there's tables out here. We've got a new statewide effort underway. I think it's pretty exciting. It's the formulation of Washington Beaver Habitat Management Guidelines, and Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife wanted this done. They're paying for it. And Compass Ecospatial, they're the ones with the table. They won the bid, and they've got ESA, which is a consultant, and in fact, one of their folks sits on the board of Beavers Northwest, and so do I. And Beavers Northwest is one of the other ones. So we all know each other, it seems like, or if we don't, we will soon. So the purpose there is, oh gosh, did I delete it? Anyway, they do have a poster somewhere here too, more about the guidelines, and it's right over there, yeah. So those are the things that are going on. And I'll also mention this, if anybody was here in the session at the end of the day yesterday in the circle, it was pretty special. And trappers and hunters and just a slice of all of us came together and talked openly and respectfully, and it was pretty wonderful. And so I do want to point out that in Washington State, USDA Wildlife Services, has a pretty significant non-lethal beaver management program, and they're working with a lot of different the other partnering agencies and nonprofits and tribes on non-lethal relocation. And another interesting thing that they're doing is research related to the chytrid fungus. If you're familiar with that one, it's bad news. It kills a lot of amphibians. And so they want to make sure that when we're doing relocation, we aren't accidentally expanding chytrid fungus. And they're partnering with WDFW on that one and Washington State University. So really good work. And from there, I was just going to give a few other examples, but I might go back to the beaver. Yeah, we'll go there. And I'll talk a little bit about my work at King County, because I can. I have a lot of great partners in the area. We've got Beavers Northwest that does incredible coexistence work. They also do outreach and education. And this year alone, they did 15 events in the summer, like walk and talks and things like that, where they're taking people out and showing them beavers and beaver ecosystems. Beavers Northwest actually turns 10 years old in December. I've been on the board the entire time. I've been the president for the last 5, and so we're going to have a little celebration. We went from half-time, maybe not even permanent, to we've currently got 4, and I'm here with King County, but right now I'm talking with my Beavers Northwest hat on. We've got 4 full-time staff, so it's growing and it's exciting, and we're doing great work. And then, and last but not least, yes, King County they're the folks who paid for me to be here and do all this great work. And so we've got, like I was about to say, Beavers Northwest that does a lot of the coexistence work. We have the Tulalip Tribe and South Sound Beaver Recovery, which are 2 relocation groups in our area, because we are able to do live trapping and relocation in Washington State. So I don't have to worry about that. If there's an issue that can only be solved that way, then I can call those guys. I think I saw Justine a second ago with the Snoqualmie Valley Preservation Alliance. They are working a lot with the King Conservation District to solve a lot of the problems in our ag district and our ag areas, which to me is it's some of the very hardest problems to solve, because if you have a beaver that builds a 6-inch dam, that area is so flat that they might flood out a farm a mile up the road. So pretty challenging stuff, and they're working on that. And so that leaves me to be able to focus these days on things more related to policy, internal and external, as well as problem solving, which I love. It turns out I didn't even know I was a big problem solver, but I love this stuff. Give me a challenge related to beavers, and I'm all in. The main one that I do, because as much as I'm interested in pretty much all things beaver, I work with a lot of people who are spending their entire careers and millions of dollars to try to restore salmon populations. And so we're planting lots of vegetation as part of our projects by streams and rivers. And you can probably guess what happens next. And so what I'm trying to do with a lot of my current work is figure out the best ways that we can plant. Oh gosh, I can slow down a little bit and take a breath. Okay, deep breath. So we've got a couple of challenges and a couple of goals in the way that I see it when we're planting along these salmon systems. We want to grow trees and to provide shade so that the water doesn't get any hotter than it already is. We want to have wood that eventually falls into the streams, and that's good for salmon for a whole host of reasons. And we also recognize the benefits of beavers, and so we want to provide food for the engine. That's how I see it. And we've got this horrible grass called reed canary grass, and I've heard people mention it from different states. I don't know if it gets 8 or 9 or 10 feet tall out here, but it does get that tall out there. And it's nasty, and I personally see that as the single biggest challenge that we're facing in that entire region. Because when you get the combination of a tall grass and you're trying to grow trees and you've got an herbivore that's really quite happy to take what you've planted, it's really, really hard to make trees in those scenarios. Now, what I should qualify that and say it's hard in smaller systems or areas where we don't own very much land. And I'm in King County. If you heard Elissa talk yesterday, she was emphasizing how urban we are. And a lot of our sites are 1/4 of an acre, or maybe 5 acres, or maybe 10 acres, 50 acres. When we really get big sites along big rivers, I'm not so worried then, because we can plant so much food that I've seen sites where you have to look for the beaver chew. It's everywhere, but the vegetation is growing so lushly. So where the challenges come in are where we're having to plant in smaller areas. And I'll cut to the chase. I'm really excited about a couple of different methods. We're testing several methods for how to plant. And I'll just run through the 4 that we're looking at right now. Normal stakes, which is what a lot of people plant. Short stakes to see if maybe beavers leave them alone longer. Fascines, which are these bundles of stakes that you can plant horizontally. And I have a lot of hope for those, although what I'm already seeing is I think it might take longer, but you might get a really good bang for the buck eventually. And then fourthly, these clumps. So, if you've done any planting ever, you've probably seen evenly spaced everywhere, which of course is not how nature does things. So I'm quite interested in clumps. And then we were going to do that. And I said, well, why don't we throw some fences around some of them anyway to see what happens? And my mind has been so blown by the difference that I'm observing that we're now actually going to start collecting data on fenced versus unfenced clumps. And the other thing that I've noticed that I'm pretty excited about learning more too is even individual stakes that have not been herbivorized yet are not growing as tall as the plants that are planted in these tight little clumps. And so I don't know if there's some soil chemistry or communication, or if it's competition or some combination. And we don't have data, so maybe I'm wrong, but it sure looks that way visually. So just starting next week, we're going to be doing another planting, and the habitat folks have agreed to let me set up another study so we can learn how big do the clumps need to be effective. And then we're also going to, I think, do a second piece, which will be species preference, because usually we get our plants all in a big mix, so you can't really do that. But they're going to be getting them identified by species, so we can look and see what are the beavers preferring, and not so that we can let people know, oh, if you plant this that they don't seem to prefer, then they won't eat it, because if you do that, they will. But they'll eat it anyway. But rather to know how to plant best, so that you can maybe guide behavior in areas where you would prefer that they eat over here, maybe less so over here. And the same with tall and short. I think that might be a good mechanism. So I just blasted that out because I didn't even know I was going to talk about that. But I'm really excited about it. And I think in the coming, by the next BeaverCon, we should have some data and more information. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Jen. Washington is actually where I encountered beavers in the wild for the first time, and went to a site and expected to see the typical single channel stream, and discovered that I couldn't walk across the pond without topping my waders. And it was over 10 years ago, but it was a moment of, for me at least. So love the Pacific Northwest. And next, I'm really excited to invite on Jean-Paul Zagarola with Bonneville Environmental Foundation.
Thank you. Honored to be here. It's kind of like speed dating. Who are you going to choose? I'm going to be talking about beaver in the beaver state, more explicitly putting the beaver back into the beaver state, building capacity for community beaver-based restoration. My name is Jean-Paul Zagarola. I work for Bonneville Environmental Foundation, where we invest in partnerships and collaborations to restore watershed ecosystems. And I'm primarily going to be talking about a statewide program that's kind of getting off the ground now, where we're working with a network of partners to mainstream beaver-based restoration in Oregon and in the region. So first off, I just want to recognize there's a ton of amazing work happening in Oregon, a lot of different groups, people. I especially want to recognize the tribal nations of Oregon who've been coexisting with beavers and maintaining and stewarding riverscapes in Oregon since time immemorial. I'm not the authority to be speaking to you about all things beaver in Oregon. However, I'm here and I'll speak to what we are working on. So just a quick overview on some of the barriers we're facing. The Oregon Watershed Enhancement Board, they're essentially our restoration engine that is funding probably the majority of restoration in the state. Between 2021 and 2023, they had almost a $200 million budget. They funded 199 restoration projects or restoration-related projects. Only 4 of those had anything to do with beaver, so that's 0.21% of the overall budget. In addition, you heard this earlier, we're dealing with a lot of the agency, red tape, regulatory barriers. For example, a recent coexistence project I was associated with, it took us two to 3 months to get fish passage review on a culvert exclusion device for a site where there's no listed federal fish. So maybe Oregon, the state, is a better term for, and here's the other side of our state flag, which is not as interesting if you ask me. Despite all that, there's a lot of momentum building, and we're making some slow headway. Beavers are definitely having a moment in the public sphere. The majority of Oregonians love beavers. The climate crisis is really a motivator to motivate all of us to really start partnering with beaver more. The research is there. It's showing the evidence of why we should be partnering with beaver. There's pretty well documented best management practices on how to coexist with beaver. There is some progress in policy and regulations, such as House Bill 3464, which requires us to report any take of beaver except in the case of an immediate danger. So there's some work to do there. We recently established the Private Forest Accords, which establishes new rules for coexistence and to promote habitat on private forest land. We have a ton of industrial forests in Oregon, as most of you probably know. And our Fish and Wildlife Department recently put out a 3-year action plan for beaver modified landscapes. It's not very comprehensive. It's only 3 years. Still work to do there, but it's a step in the right direction. And there are a ton of tools available where we can start better understanding where the habitat exists and where the beaver currently are. So again, just want to recognize all the different efforts occurring. The problem is no one's really telling the story. No one is connecting all these different efforts. It's really going to take us moving together, paddling in sync in a similar direction to start changing the minds of our state and to some extent our federal agencies, but mostly our state agencies, and just sharing the lessons learned. We're essentially working in isolation right now. Oops. So some of the specific things we're working on, and I'll get into this a little bit more, is developing some very accessible decision support tools for practitioners, trying to tell the stories, build essentially a community of practice in Oregon. We have a beaver management working group, but it's only agency representatives in that. And our restoration community is made up primarily by small local nonprofits, and they are not involved in that conversation on beaver management. Again, we're trying to figure out a way to paddle in sync and together. So just some examples of what we've done, what we're doing with partners. We were a partner in the Midwest Beaver Partnership where we tested some novel planning projects. This one is a BRAT effort that we went through. So we used, thank you. We used a, basically your out-of-the-box BRAT, thanks. And we went through a massive data collection effort to field calibrate that BRAT, sort of a new version of the beaver restoration assessment tool. Through that process, we were able to basically customize a protocol to our specific region. This is Western Oregon, lots of tree cover, temperate environment, very different from where BRAT was developed in the Intermountain West. We were also to engage various sectors of the community. We had 4 students involved from a program called New Beginnings for Tribal Students that provides career opportunities and provides experience for students interested in the environmental field. We had 3 volunteers engaged from the Great Old Broads for Wilderness. And so it's a fairly simple protocol. And this team of surveyors were able to get through 144 surveys. We inventoried 113 dams and surveyed over 30 miles. Just a couple photos from our field crews. Amazing folks. And then I'm going to speak to a stakeholder engagement process we embarked on. And I just want to let you all know that folks from the Midwest Beaver Partnership are going to be speaking in depth about both of these projects around 2:35, I believe, in this room. So please attend that if you want to learn more. But this stakeholder engagement process, we contracted a social research firm to do 13 in-depth interviews, 4 focus groups. We got 400 surveys returned from the timber, agriculture sectors, public works departments, private rural residential landowners. Here are some key highlights, but again, I encourage you to attend that session later on to really kind of dig into those. So now we're starting to scale the work. We're partnering with folks across the state, using some of those pilot projects as examples of how to better understand where the beaver habitat is in their local area. So BRAT has been run for the entire Pacific Northwest. We only have to engage these practitioners, local community-based organizations, tribes, to go through that same data collection effort, and we can end up with a fully calibrated BRAT specific to each ecoregion of the state, across the state. We're already starting to do that in Central Oregon and on the Oregon coast. Folks are out doing surveys right now. And we're improving that process as we go along. With the folks in Central Oregon, we're adding on to our protocol a way to really understand what is a thriving beaver colony that's creating dispersers and connecting those to where the good habitat exists that we're identifying through the BRAT process. Thanks. And then we're continuing to engage the community in those locales as we do that through our protocol. One of the partners we're working with has like 4 teams of volunteers out there getting the work done. So next steps, we're starting to do this in Washington as well. We have some of the staff at BEF work closely with a variety of Washington partners. Looks like we may have some funding to expand that work. We really want to understand what are the overlapping barriers and opportunities in getting the word out, sharing stories, lessons learned about that. We're starting to support some research to understand what greenhouse gas flux looks like at specific beaver sites. And then we want to pull all this together into a regional beaver hub where we can host the tools, the data that practitioners can easily access the research as well, understand what policy is occurring that's related to beaver in Oregon, in Washington, and then share the success stories via this beaver hub and create this community practice. So just last thing I'll leave you all with is, I'm super optimistic about our ability to work with these network of amazing partners to start mainstreaming beaver-based restoration in the Beaver State. Thanks.
Go Beavers. I mean, I have to say Oregon sort of has a leg up. They have tens of thousands of people sitting in sporting events yelling, "Go Beavers!" I mean, if we could all only have that in our own state, they're sort of off to a good start, so pretty cool. All right, next we have Catlow Shipek, hopefully I'm saying that right, Senior Program Director in Watershed Management Group. Welcome you up. Did I butcher your last name?
Yeah, no, it's
Sorry,
good. It's
I
good.
did?
No, it's good. Greetings. Thank you. Greetings from southern Arizona. How many of you knew we had beavers? Okay, we say that in Tucson and nobody raises their hand. So you all are more informed than most of our local residents. It's the... So I'm just going to do a quick update of what we've been up to for the past few years. one, we're kind of new in the beaver world. So this is so exciting to be here, learning so much these past few days. We're really excited, especially to kind of embark on the policy realm in the next few years. So maybe we can come back with some updates. I'm just going to take you through a survey process we developed, some of the findings that we're getting from that, some of the new collaborations that are building from that, and new restoration opportunities. So the San Pedro River is a binational river. It starts in Mexico, Sonora, Mexico, and flows north into Arizona and combines with the Gila and then flows to the Colorado. So interesting note, the San Pedro River was once known as the Beaver River by early colonizers. I grew up along the San Pedro River, not a single beaver. So I graduated high school, just to date myself, in 1996, left for college, went to Illinois, and then lo and behold, Arizona Game and Fish Department, BLM, reintroduced beaver on this river in 1999 and 2000. They introduced over 20 beavers, and in just a few decades, that number rose to over 100 beavers on that river. So it kind of peaked around 2010. So the question is, what's the state of the beaver now, right? So interesting also to note is that the beaver from this population dispersed upstream into Mexico and also dispersed downstream to the lower San Pedro. The other interesting thing to note about this river, it's highly degraded. It's very entrenched. There's groundwater pumping that has dewatered sections of the river, so it's a discontinuous perennial system. So we embarked on a community science effort. We learned from a couple locals of how to look for a beaver sign, how to document beaver sign. They had been doing it over 20 years, just informally, and using that to inform the BLM, Bureau of Land Management, on what is the population of the beaver. So we came in because the BLM, oh, sorry, thank you. Now I can hear myself, yeah. The Bureau of Land Management was proposing to release beaver on a adjacent watershed, and we're like, well, what's the state of the beaver on the San Pedro? And everybody just threw out their hands and didn't know. So we're like, shouldn't we know what the population fate is on this other watershed before we fully embark on this new watershed approach? So with community residents, partners, Sonora, Mexico, Arizona, we survey over 40 miles of the San Pedro on the Arizona side, 25 miles of tributaries on the Sonora side, work with a number of different partners, especially on the Mexico side, Profana, CONAMP, Naturalia, other volunteers. We use a Survey 123, and then we peer review these results with local beaver experts. I would love to share some of this with you because what I'm learning is like, maybe we should reinterpret some of our data. But with that, we're moving forward, and this is everything we look for. The beaver are very reclusive. We rarely, almost never, see beaver unless we go out there middle of the night with our game cameras. And this is how we estimate beaver population. So these are not typically dam building beavers because these are high energy systems. So we're estimating 4 beavers per family group, 1 family group roughly based on a cluster of activity every half mile to mile. And we define a cluster of activity of not just chews, but there's chews, tracks, slides, maybe an active lodge, ideally an active dam, but not always. And so from our last, this is from spring 2024, we're about to do fall 2024. We're kind of changing our timing, our seasonality of surveys. We're seeing the clusters of activity. So if you start on the bottom, the southern extent on the Arizona side, we're seeing a family unit, some roaming units, another family unit. And so that's how we start to pick up and estimate our population. The other interesting thing to note, we do partner with the Nature Conservancy who does wet-dry mapping, and so we're kind of noting and starting to prioritize where are we surveying based on where is their perennial water from year to year. So over the 3 years we've surveyed formally, this is, the blue dots are 2024, green 2022, orange 2021. So what we're starting to see is a tightening up of those clustering units. So that's a little bit disconcerting to us. So in the past, we had a wider distribution, and now they're coming into these tighter units. So the question may be why? So there's a lot of theories out there. What I'm kind of seeing, my background's in hydrology, watershed planning, is that we're seeing bigger flash flood events, and we're seeing harder droughts. So we're kind of going through this really hard cycle that is leaving that river a little bit less hospitable to protecting the beaver, especially from predation. I'm hearing from other wildlife managers that mountain lion populations are going up. So beavers are tasty snacks for them. So this is the distribution of our survey results, kind of based on the number of observations that volunteers are noting, and that kind of lends to where that clustering of activity is. The sad note is our 2024 survey on the Mexico side had to be postponed, so we're going to continue this fall. And this is part of the issue working in the border region where we have border trafficking and violence that can pick up from time to time. And so we do very much value the safety of all of our participants, partners, volunteers. And this is where we rely heavily on our Mexico partners to give us access and go along with us and make that outreach and make that safety decision. So just a quick table of all of our results to then how we estimate the family units. What we're seeing from 2024 to 2022 is that we're losing population on the Arizona side. The Mexico side is a little bit undetermined, but we do have 2 years of data where it's a slight decline in that population estimate. In more graphical form, and then also with the Mexico side of the distribution of the earlier 2 surveys, we can see from that map that this interesting thing is the Sonora population is maintaining somewhat more stable than the Arizona population, where we're still seeing this general decline from a high of over 100 beavers. So what's next? So coming up this fall, who of you are snowbirds or no snowbirds that like to travel to southern Arizona? We have 3 survey dates, 1 in November, 2 in November, 1 in December for surveying the San Pedro. This is an awesome, very remote extent of the San Pedro. There's not even trails out there. It's just a great way to walk and observe and be out in nature and see a portion of a very wild river that most people do not see. So come join us. If you're going to be in the area, reach out to me. We'll get you signed up. We're also planning to start to elevate how do we do more restoration and partner with beaver and maybe set the stage for inviting more beaver to recolonize. So we're doing that in partnership with Arizona Game and Fish Department, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, coming up this next spring, February and March. And then thanks to the Beaver Institute, we got partnered with the Glen Canyon Institute to start to monitor and think about how to do annual surveys in the tributaries to Lake Powell in Glen Canyon. I think definitely coming out of this conference, we're going to be starting to do that advocacy and that policy work a little bit harder because there's a lot of barriers and challenges that we have in the state of Arizona. And partly, I'm just representing southern Arizona, so what's happening in the rest of Arizona, that's where we need to better connect with, especially our friends in the wetter portions. Lastly, the really good news is the BLM did move through their environmental assessment process for Las Ciénegas National Conservation Area. They're moving forward this winter to install BDAs, and then next year, as conditions permit, they will be starting to release family units of beaver in a new watershed. So we're really excited about that. And I think with that, just some PALs. We've been dabbling in PALs and learning. So starting with, along with pole planting, the big thing for us is removing cattle from this environment so we can start to restore our degraded river systems. We had a very dry monsoon season, so this was a very dry year. So unfortunately, we're not holding water, but we are starting to accumulate the sediment and debris to hopefully next season, maybe a wetter season, we can have more impact. So I think with that, thank you.
Thanks, Catlow. Wow, I was sitting with a group of Coloradans last night, and we were throwing around numbers about how many beaver we think are in Colorado, and looking at the numbers you had on that screen made me feel a bit fortunate to be in Colorado. You're definitely fighting an uphill battle there, so thank you for your good work. And up next, we have someone whose name I know I can pronounce correctly, Chris Smith, who is the Wildlife Program Director with WildEarth Guardians.
You got it right. I don't have any visuals if you want to. Thank you all for being here. A certain charismatic playwright who's wandering around discouraged a PowerPoint, which is fine because this conference is otherwise awesome, but you all are deprived of incredible New Mexico eye candy. And we New Mexicans, because there will be a couple of us, get to show up kind of on brand, a little raggedy and informal. So bear with us on that. My name is Chris Smith. I'm coming to y'all from my hometown of Santa Fe, New Mexico. I work for WildEarth Guardians. We are a West-wide conservation advocacy group. Our kind of trademark and what we're most known for are big seismic litigation wins on climate and public lands primarily and wildlife. So if you work for a federal agency and you're in the room, we've sued you. Sorry, not sorry. And we work in 4 program areas, public lands, wild rivers, climate and energy, and wildlife, and I'm our wildlife program director. So in 2021 in New Mexico, WildEarth Guardians was a big part of a big effort to legislatively ban recreational and commercial trapping across all of our public lands. Whether you disagree with that policy or not, I think it's a pretty good one. So I think it's good for beavers too. Since then, since that law was enacted, we've seen a 40% reduction in beaver trapping across the state. So good for beaver populations along with a lot of other critters. One of the frameworks for pushing and passing that law was, and there were several, including, you know, cruelty and public safety, et cetera, but the framework that most resonated with me is protecting wildlife because of their ecological role, and obviously beavers are one of the primary examples of that. So following 2021, we were kind of looking around saying, wow, we built a lot of power to do this, you know, big thing. How do we leverage that power to continue this type of work? And I thought, you know, let's move that power, let's move that enthusiasm, let's move those politicians to focus on beavers. So just last year, I started the New Mexico Beaver Project, which kind of follows up from the New Mexico Beaver Summit, which we ran in 2020 with Defenders of Wildlife and featured a lot of folks who are here at this conference and also kind of giants, Ben Goldfarb, Mary O'Brien, Bill Zedike. So we did kind of the passive beaver education part first, and now we're really kickstarting the advocacy efforts. So the New Mexico Beaver Project is intent on changing policies and directing funding to better restore and coexist with beavers across the state for all of the many, many benefits that you all are well aware of, that I'm grateful I don't have to educate you about. So we're seeking a statewide plan, which was first called for in 2014 by our Senate, but never materialized. And we want that plan to be written, funded, and implemented so that we have a better systemic and proactive way of getting more beavers and their magic on the landscape, which in my estimation we currently lack as a state. My role in that is telling stories, weaving stories together from beaver believers, restoration practitioners, scientists, people who are at the forefront of wildfire and climate crisis, in order to change the narrative of New Mexico and bring back beavers in a really big way. New Mexico is the best state in the union, but we do face some challenges, including, like I just mentioned, being at the forefront of the climate crisis. Our ecosystems are fragile. Our human communities are very close to catastrophes. Oftentimes, we've experienced tremendous wildfire, tremendous drought. Just last week, we had tragic and deadly flooding in portions of our state. So that's a big challenge, but we're ready to face that because we have, unlike other states, a ton of money right now, primarily from fueling the climate crisis, unfortunately. So my goal is to invest the money we have now so that we have water security, climate resiliency in the future. New Mexico Beaver Project works with a lot of people and a lot of organizations across the state, but we don't tell the whole story. There are a lot of groups, a lot of people, tribal and Pueblo entities who are leading on beaver work. And my job is hopefully just to tell those stories and weave them together. So y'all are going to hear from 2 other New Mexico Beaver believers, Peggy Dar from Defenders of Wildlife and then Sarah Milligan from Bandelier National Monument, who have cool beaver stories to tell you as well.
Hello, everyone. I'm going to take this off because I like to walk around a little. Yeah, I'm Peggy Dar. I am with Defenders of Wildlife. I am the New Mexico representative. Not originally from New Mexico, but I love New Mexico very much. It's my second home. So I'm going to talk about a few things that Defenders of Wildlife does for beaver conservation in New Mexico. And it looks like we don't have a lot of time left for New Mexico, so I'm going to go through it really fast. So some of you may have heard that we have a beaver coexistence cost share program. We have a flyer on our table, Bothered by Beavers. We implement this in many states, and in New Mexico, since I'm talking about New Mexico, we implement it in New Mexico. In New Mexico, we do it a little differently as far as cost share because we have a wide variety of socioeconomic conditions. And so we pay for a minimum of 50%, and then we ask landowners to just give us an honest assessment of what they can contribute, and then we go from there. So another thing that we're working on is a large restoration project, thanks to funding from the World Wildlife Fund, the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation, the Carol Petrie Foundation, and individual donors. If you're at my Beavers and Firefly presentation, you learned a little bit about that. I'm not going to get into it much. We're doing low-tech process-based restoration along 2 tributaries of the Rio Grande, and the Rio Grande is unfortunately classified as one of the most endangered rivers in the world, I think it was. So then we've also funding a statewide virtual beaver dam survey, and hopefully that will be out by the end of this year. If you saw some presentations earlier, this is one of the prereqs for helping to prioritize beaver restoration. So, and then after that, we're hoping to get together with other organizations to fund a BRAT model for New Mexico so that we know where beavers are and how many beavers our different rivers can hold and start to prioritize. And I'm going to stop there so that the next person has something. Who's next? Yeah, Sarah.
Thank you. This is how we roll in New Mexico. All right, I think I have a couple minutes. Hopefully everybody saw, I have 2 minutes. Hopefully everybody saw my talk yesterday, and I don't have to say much. But so I work at Bandelier National Monument. It's in northern New Mexico, about an hour north of Santa Fe, northwest. We have a lot of restoration going on right now. We had big fires and floods in 2011, 2013. So a lot of tree planting. We've put in 27 beavers since 2019, I guess, into one of our canyons. We have another canyon we're working on restoring, which is another riparian area. We're working with Trees, Water, People. I don't know if anyone's here from them, but they are awesome. And then also the Forest Service, and then one of the local pueblos, because that canyon kind of flows through all of that land. So that's an upcoming project. We're hoping to get some restoration done there and then put some beavers in over there as well, because the beavers are awesome and have been doing really good work in Frijoles Canyon. So that is basically what's going on at Bandelier. I think I talked really fast, but so I have 1 minute left if somebody else wants to talk.
Well, New Mexico, thank you for being so flexible, and I'm glad you're in other talks. And I just want to say, Chris, we can still be friends, even though you sue us all the time at the Forest Service. We can be buddies. I wish you were suing us more often for not doing beaver work. That would be cool, so let's talk. All right, so next, we only have about 20 minutes left of our session. So we're going to kind of do it twofold. One, we're going to open it up if you have a question for one of our 8 presenters. And second, if you are somewhere else in the nation that hasn't shared or had a minute or two, try to keep it at 3 minutes or less. But if you want to share from another state or within the states we've heard some of the work that you are doing, we'd love to hear from you as well. So those are kind of the 2 options, questions for the presenters or sharing something from where you are working. So feel free to raise your hand and I'll bring you the mic. Got our first. Great.
Thank you. My name is Rob Walton. With Alexa Whipple, I co-chair the Beaver Institute's Policy Legal Working Group, which recently merged with the Management Working Group. And my friend JP invited you to go to his panel at 2:35. I have another panel at 2:35. So we have the Beaver Institute's Policy Working Group in the Aspen room. So if you can't go to ours, look for a tape version of it. But JP and I work closely together. I wanted to follow up by saying that imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. So I would like to flatter the Montana Working Group by saying that at the Policy Management Working Group this afternoon, I'm going to boldly propose that the Beaver Institute follow the lead of the Montana Beaver Working Group Action Plan Goal Number 4, which you may remember was streamline the legal and policy obstacles to beaver habitat restoration and relocation. I propose that our goal is to do that for every province, every state, every relevant federal agency in 5 years. So we'd like you to join us. If you go to the Beaver Institute Working Group, you can find us how to connect with us online.
Thank you.
Thank
you.
you.
Appreciate it. Perfect.
I have a question or a comment or a question over here.
Oh, I was going to tell you things about Washington State.
Yes, please.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, stand up.
Okay, great. Hi, everybody. My name is Sean Beeling, and I'm from Washington State Department of Fish and Wildlife. I get to oversee the Washington Beaver Relocation Permit Program, and I am thrilled to tell you a couple of details that have happened over the past year. First, just like a couple of weeks ago, our permit program, which has been in a pilot state for the past 4 or 5 years, has become a permanent program. Very pleased by this. Yep. And also, I'd love to let you know that we have permittees that are relocating in about a third of our counties, many of those being very populous areas where we have a lot of beaver conflict. Very happy about that. We also have a lot of fantastic collaborations occurring between our relocators, USDA Wildlife Services, and some of our permitted wildlife control operators that are operating around the state. So we have more collaborations that are happening now more than ever, and it is amazing how many relocations that have happened just this year. I believe that we have almost doubled the amount of relocations in the state in just this year since our iteration or our first initiation of this program back in 2019. So things are moving right along. We'll see how it goes.
Great.
Thank you so much. Really exciting. I saw this hand first here.
And then we'll go to the back.
Joaquin Murrieta with Watershed Management Group. You hear us talk about beavers in Mexico. This is just a suggestion for Beaver Institute. How can we work together with Beaver Institute to elevate the role of beavers all the way from Canada to northern Mexico? It wasn't a strategy for the CEC with the monarch butterflies. I think it would be great to elevate beaver work in these 3 countries and how we collaborate for that. So maybe in the next Beaver Forum, we can have these 3 countries together and elevate the role of all the agencies and all the communities that are working towards beaver celebration in North America.
Thank you. I'll make sure that is heard by the right ears.
Okay. Yeah. I'm Wesley Rowe, Santa Barbara Beaver Brigade. I'm representing a group of festivals that happen in Santa Barbara, in California. We have a festival in San Luis Obispo, 1,000 people come. Next year, this is our third year come up, we're going to have 2,000. There's another one in Martinez by Heidi Perriman. She was the first to start it. She's in her 16th year. If you want a point where you reach the communities and educate them, I can tell you this is a phenomenal way to do it, is to have a Beaver Festival. And you can ask us all, because Heidi was our teacher, and then we launched after we went up and observed her doing it. So they're powerful ways to reach your community, and you'll be surprised how many people that come through that you can, and especially if you gear it towards children, we have Beaver puppet shows, we have all kinds of stuff for children, and music. Anyway, so just thought I'd let you know.
Thank you. I love the idea of all the merch that could come out of a Beaver Festival.
Hi there, Brian Hummel. I've got 2 quick questions for the experts in this room. One, I'm from Texas. Would love to get connected with any other Texas Beaver people. I see one here. And the other is information on how to track the Beaver sign and the Beaver chews. So we have tons of beaver in Texas. They're not often building dams in my area, but there's lots of chew. And I'd love to just help educate people that there are beaver in our rivers to start increasing awareness in Texas, but I need help.
For a quick answer, can I jump to our Arizona friend here to just like 1 minute answer to that? Yeah.
Sure. Happy to connect, happy to help. I think the one thing we're struggling with is how do we share that data? Because we still have active trapping. And so thinking about how do we aggregate it, how do we display it, at what level of detail do we share? But it is great for storytelling and especially great for tracking population trend dynamics. So yeah, happy to talk more.
Thank you. And Ashley, are you with somebody? Yep.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Miller. I'm a staff wildlife biologist with the USDA Wildlife Services. Yes, we are still trapping and removing beavers, but I do no lethal work with beavers. I do, however, help administer our non-lethal initiative. That's in 12 states, but we're doing that beaver work aspect of that. And 5 to 6, and then there's beaver work that is done outside of non-lethal beaver damage management that is done outside of that non-lethal initiative as well. I want to thank the couple of partners that acknowledged that work today. We appreciate your partnership in the field and your public acknowledgement here at BeaverCon. And there's 8 of us here today. I want to pass the mic to my colleague really quick. Thanks a lot.
Hi, I'm Emily Blizzard. I'm the State Director for Wildlife Services, USDA in Colorado. You've seen our booth here. We are a sponsor. I do have 4 staff here. We are working with a non-lethal initiative, and we do care about beavers. Obviously, I'm in a beaver suit, and are dedicated to conservation, and I'm really excited to be in this space. I want to partner with you. I'd really love for you to come and be open to the conversation and partnering with us and stopping by. But thank you for allowing us to be here.
Awesome. Thank you. We love the non-lethal coexistence work. All right.
This is just a practical question for anyone in the room. Where can I find funding for on-the-ground surveys? I have a specific watershed in mind.
What state are you in?
California.
Does anyone in California have an answer to that question before I jump to federal groups? All right. Brock at Occidental Arts and Ecology is going to be your go-to guy. And I know in Colorado that Colorado Parks and Wildlife has been a really excellent funder of wetland restoration work, and a lot of that gets applied to beaver-based restoration work. So I don't know exactly how the California's equivalent department feels, but maybe that would be another place to start poking around. They'll be open for it. I get the impression California likes beavers, which is excellent. We'll take it. All right. I didn't have an, oh, you have a hand. Okay, great.
Hi. Really wish I had a beaver outfit myself.
My name is Justin Genza. I'm from Southeast Michigan. I have a small coexistence business there, and a lot like Clay and Wisconsin, we have a lot of uphill battles when it comes to permitting, and so that's kind of the foci of the work that's going on there. And we're looking at putting together a beaver working group in Michigan right now to kind of start exploring how we might be a lot more effective in dealing with some of these problems. Also, we're trying to think a little bit more concretely about what it means when you have a state agency that allows some of the flow devices and other work to occur without a permit, and then some of it to completely get thwarted through the permitting process. So if folks have any feedback on that, who have dealt with that, who are kind of doing work even though they're not supposed to be doing work, and kind of threading some of these needles, we'd love to hear about that.
I see you. I'm coming.
Tim Ingalls from Amarillo, Texas. You've probably heard my question before, some of you, but I guess since we're pitching out here, I mean, trying to introduce a beaver on our ranch, slight impasse. Texas Parks and Wildlife says can't move a fur-bearing animal. So just put it out there. If anyone wants to help me think about how to legally approach this or something, kind of looking for maybe money for cost share, for like prepping the site, and or just thinking through, like, do we have a lawyer ask pointed questions about the state law or whatever that is. That's kind of what I'm thinking about right now. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jim Shepard, Beavers Forever out of Northern Nevada. Just recently put together a baseline database of beaver in the ancient Lake Lahontan watershed. I have that available if anyone wants a copy and that. We're just getting started and trying to get more information out to folks where beaver are, where they're around. Everyone thinks of it being a dry desert, but we got 316 mountain ranges with streams in them. And we're just getting started on the beaver game and getting them replaced from the ravages of trapping and agriculture. Thank you.
What we got? Anybody? Some more? We've got two more. Alli, you want to grab one? I'll grab one.
I was just question for the USDA folks. Could you give us just the elevator pitch of what this non-lethal initiative is? And is that just helping with trapping and moving nuisance beavers, or will there be devices? Okay. Okay. And sorry, how did the flow devices fit in? Okay. Yeah. Okay. Great, thank you. That was perfect. Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much.
My name is Colin Krochak. I'm from Duluth, Minnesota. I missed Bob's presentation earlier. He's from Minnesota area. But I work at an engineering company. I don't work with NGOs. Our company is not an NGO. We actually don't work even with individual landowners. We work with like large industrial private entities. And so I'd like to hear just more about partnering with those entities, in the future, currently or in the future. I just haven't heard really any talk about that in any of the sessions this whole week. The reason I'm interested in that is because those entities have a crap ton of money. Just one of the clients we work with is worth $78 billion. And so they could be potentially a huge, if we could get them to ally with Beaver positive management and thought, they could be a huge partner and a huge stakeholder and a huge funder for a lot of this research I hear about and advocacy groups and even NGOs. And that I feel like that could be done in a way in which they're not necessarily hijacking the outcome of those, but just as a supporter. Another reason being, I think they actually have, at least in northern Minnesota, they actually have a huge cultural impact. There's a lot of people who vote or even live and die by the way these corporations vote or run themselves. And so I think if we could find ways to partner with those groups, you could actually find many branches off of that of Beaver allies. So.
Great. I don't know if anyone has a response, but I actually do. That Ashley and I worked on a project a couple years ago, and one of the groups that funded it was Coca-Cola. And I mean, honestly, the amount they gave relative to what they're worth was a pittance, but we were very happy to have their money. And so that's not every project. It hasn't been super common, but it happened. And I think you bring up a good point that these are kind of untapped resources. And, we could have a whole big debate on why Coca-Cola might be interested in watershed restoration, but that is totally for another time.
Yeah.
And I have another.
Maybe I'll add to that real quick too. In partnering, I think Beaver believers are the perfect people to be the conduit between maybe big industry and kind of understanding, kind of Google researching who in your area is doing Beaver work, who's excited about Beaver work, and then linking the big industry who has some of the funding with some more Beaver believers, and then trying to bring that collaborative together. So I think the thing that you can do is just who is in the area already doing that, and how do you bring them into a project and maybe do a presentation for that company, or maybe explain to them maybe as they're building out their new project and there happens to be, they're down in the valley bottom, and how they could do something that would still allow for beavers to recolonize there or coexist there. So being that conduit between whoever's in the area and those big corporate could really be a really neat combination of funding and interest.
Yeah, I love when people show up with funding for me. So you'd be Beaver people's favorite real quick. Now I'd like to pass the mic on here.
Hey everybody, I'm Allison Cook. I work in Washington State. I hope I'm not the last person because this question's a drag, but is anyone approaching Army Corps about installing devices or any of this management? And what has been your experience working with Army Corps?
If anyone from Army Corps is in the room, we'd love to hear from you.
Hi, not from Army Corps, but work with them regularly. They have an excellent program called Engineering with Nature, and if you look up, Corps of Engineers has a seismic shift. Read the little memorandum of understanding that just came out, or the document that just came out. The Corps of Engineers now is supposed to look at nature-based solutions before any gray infrastructure solutions. So seismic shift, Army Corps of Engineers, and you'll know about as much about it as I do.
Can I ask a quick question? Can I ask one of Catlow? We haven't asked our presenters too many questions. I was worried about the wall that is being built on the Mexico-U.S. border. How do they build the wall over perennial streams? And is there ever going to be a possibility to allow for animals to pass through? And how do they just build over perennial and then just allow seepage out the bottom? Or I was just curious about that.
Yeah, I have something to add to the Army Corps question.
Oh, sorry.
No,
Okay,
that's
Army
okay.
Corps and then the wall, guys.
Yeah, that's a heavy question too. Yeah, so the Army Corps has a training in Missoula, and there were 2 batches of classes that came, and so Shelby and I actually went and discussed non-lethal options with them and gave them kind of just a classroom overview of the options, how to build them as much as you can in a classroom, and then like went through the cost, the labor expectations, the maintenance, and all of them with them. So steps towards the right direction as far as that. So hopefully we'll have those opportunities in the future as well.
And I actually want clarity on if you meant flow device conflict resolution structures or if you were talking about restoration structures or both. Okay, understood. You have that on Army Corps stuff.
So I talked to the district chief of regulatory in the Portland district of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers about this, and she basically said if you want to put in a flow device, apply for a permit on a case-by-case basis. They wouldn't generalize.
And do you know the permit number, or was it different case by case as well?
Under the Clean Water Act removal fill, if you put in devices that constantly fill, in theory, you need a core.
So a nationwide 27 still? Okay. Okay. So nationwide 27. Most people here are probably somewhat familiar with that, but.
Yeah, so we've actually put in flow devices for the Army Corps of Engineers before. Normally what it was man-made dam structures, and the beavers were blocking the drainage from those dams. To be honest, I wasn't the one that dealt with permitting, so I can't tell you too much about that, but we have put in numerous flow devices for the Army Corps of Engineers.
And he was in Massachusetts. And I've also done this successfully without permits specifically for flow devices, but it might depend on your local Army Corps office. So I would definitely recommend, calling them and finding an ally in that office because, they're going to help you make that application as good as possible as well. And if they're being resistant, just keep swimming.
And in Colorado, we did Army Corps permits for BDAs within the stream. But then if it was going to be a flow device, I'm really into berms. If you haven't met me, I talk about berms a lot. Where we do a berm to keep a wetland wet and to keep a road dry. You just build like a 4-foot berm and things like that. And pond levelers, we are not getting Army Corps because it's considered road maintenance under Forest Service and our federal agreement. So we don't have to necessarily do Corps permits for things that are within a roadway. Do you have one more on that? Because we may or may not have 2 minutes left.
So it is 12:10, but so if you're curious to hear about fish passage and things at the border, stick around. If not, go about your day.
Thanks for coming. Yeah.
I may pass this over to Joaquin if you're interested in learning.
We can stick around. Yes, there is a wall over there and conflicts a lot with a lot of things.
You can call it BAFTA, the Beaver America Free Trade Agreement.
And
here, I can take it. I'll just tell people to find you.
Yeah.
If you're curious about border stuff, please find Joaquin. He is lovely to chat to, and he has a fun beaver mask. And thank you to all our presenters.